Hey, how's it going? My name is Johnny Clean, and this is another episode of the DreadHead Dread Vlog. Today we are going to talk about how to remove lumps, bumps, and loops from your dreads. So lumps, bumps, and loops are all basically the same problem. You have part of the hair in the dread locking unevenly and pulling the dread into a weird shape. So, hair running through the center squeezes it up into like an odd, either a zigzag back and forth or just a bump that sticks out the side. In any case, you may not want them there. Some people like the way they look. If the dread has a lot of bumps and loops, then maybe that particular dread looks cool, it has character. But if it's otherwise smooth, or if all your dreads are smooth and you have just a couple with like one large funny looking bump, you probably want to take care of it. So removing them is difficult in a mature dread. When the dreads are young, you can remove them just by palm rolling, and you can generally prevent them by palm rolling when the dreads are new, when you have wax in the hair. The palm rolling in the wax helps the hair kind of move around and lock evenly instead of locking more in one spot than in another. Even if you do that, you're probably still going to have a few bumps, loops, and stuff like that going on. So being able to take care of it is a plus. The only tool that I know of that takes care of them, in pretty much all cases, is the Lock-Docta, and that's because it kind of gives you direct control and allows you to push the hair around where you want it to go. The reason why the Lock-Docta tends to work really well is that the problem is caused by hair that's contracting and holding it in that position. So that hair needs to be released on the inside of the dread. Until you release it, it's going to continue to stretch. It's when you pull it out, and it's going to continue to pull everything back together and cause the problem again and again. So by releasing that hair that's under tension, it can allow it to relax and go away. So yeah. So to actually take care of these issues, it's pretty simple. Basically, you're going to poke the Lock-Docta right into the top of the issue. So let's say it's a bump, okay? You're going to find the highest spot on the bump, and you're going to poke it directly from that spot into the center of the dread. And you'll just do that, like moving around the bump, poke it a few times, and get it all pushed in. A dreaded loop, is pretty much the same thing, and any hair that's sticking off the surface, that'll get pushed in as well, and so it'll end up looking smoother. As you can see, zigzags cause the dread to bunch up and like wiggle back and forth like that, and they cause the dreads to lose a lot of length. So we're going to talk about how to get rid of those. The way you do it is pretty much the same as what you do for bumps and loops and lumps. You're going to focus on the highest part, and you're going to try to push it towards the center of the dread. The difference is you're going to want to keep some tension, like some downward tension on the dread while you're poking. That will kind of allow it to stretch out, as it releases, and you'll have a better idea of where you are, and how much more you need to do and where. When you're actually poking the dread, it helps to put your hands together like a hinge or a clamshell kind of thing, and that steadies your poking hand. You also want to try to poke away from yourself just for safety reasons. And if you can poke, if you're holding the dread and you're poking basically towards your thumbnail instead of your thumb itself, then if you should slip and hit, it's going to hit your thumbnail, and that's not going to, hurt nearly as bad. So, all those things go to make for more accurate poking and safer poking. So I definitely recommend that. Usually you can find some way to kind of hinge your hand, if it's on the top of your head and you can hinge, by resting your hand there and just, doing that, it's going to be a whole lot more accurate than if you're just poking away like that. You're probably going to stab yourself. And it's sharp, so yeah, you don't want to do that. As you're poking the bump or loop or whatever into the dread, you don't want to poke in exactly the same spot. You'll move the tool up and down the dread as you go, and you'll poke, from different sides of the dread, but you always want to poke towards the center. If you poke towards the edge of the dread, it'll tend to make the dread spin when the tool hits it, and that can cause the tip to bend, and that's the quickest way to break the poker off the end of the Lock-Docta. If you do break it, you can put another one in. You can swap them out, but poking straight in and straight out will prevent the dread from turning, so you won't break the needle. It usually takes about 10 to 15 pokes to get a average sized bump into the dread. You don't want to sit there and overdo it, because you are releasing some of the hair on the inside of the dread as you're like pushing them away. So over time you can weaken the dread if you're poking in the same spot over and over and over. After you poke the dread for a while, you'll see the hair pushing in, and you'll also notice some of the hair pushing out on the other side, just straight hair on the back of the bump or whatever that you're trying to take care of. Don't worry about that. It'll go away when you palm roll. It'll get pushed into the dread and lock in with the other hair. As you're poking the tool into the dread, it'll probably just come out the back side. If you have really thick dreads, it might not come all the way out. When you're done poking, you'll have about 80% of the bump or lump or whatever pushed in. You don't have to continue going until it disappears completely. It will disappear more after you're done and you start palm rolling. It'll kind of just melt away, and it'll be gone almost completely. Now, it's very rare for it to disappear totally without a trace. It does happen in some cases, but usually it's slightly wider there, whatever. There's some indication of a bump previously, and that'll continue to fade. It's after a couple washings and stuff like that. So it'll become less and less noticeable. But in general, you take a dread from looking really bumpy and lumpy and horrid to looking almost completely smooth. And I don't know, it's a cool thing to be able to do.